Hello, everybody. I would like to call the regular board meeting, May 26 to order. First one, flag salute.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So the next one is board agenda approval. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Thanks, Jerry. A second, please. Thanks, Phyllis. Oh, please go. Make it roll call.
Trustee Lou,
Aye.
trustee Cunningham,
Thanks, you.
Aye.
Okay,
trustee Vogel.
Aye.
Trustee Leon,
Aye.
trustee Manhattan.
aye. Thank you. So we have a closed session. So is there any public comment for the closed session, before the closed session?
No, there is not.
Okay, thank you. So we'll adjourn for the closed session and we'll be back around 6 p.m. Thank you. Okay, we are going to start. We are back from the closed session. There's nothing to report. So let's go for superintendent's report.
All right, well, thank you. And before we get started tonight, I did want to take a moment for us just to address the tragic and the heartbreaking act of violence that we know was experienced at the elementary school in Texas. We know that it's weighing on many of our minds. Our hearts go out to the families that have lost their loved ones and, in this very senseless act of violence. Our families should feel secure when they send their kids to school, and they should feel that they're coming home to them safely. And we know that parents and staff are concerned, and rightly so. At CUSD, we did send out a communication. We have been getting a lot of emails from our parents just concerned about, what are we doing for safety? And again, it is a priority. It's something that we are constantly looking at and analyzing. We address it through multiple measures. Each school has a comprehensive school safety plan that is annually reviewed. This is done with our local law enforcement agencies and our emergency response systems. They actually are a visible presence on campus, and they help build that positive relationship with our staff and students, our community. Each year, our local law enforcement agencies actually come through and do a training of our staff and conduct a run, hide, and defend drills at schools in preparation of any such of these types of violent acts. We know that there's been many questions around our actual physical campuses. We actually initiated fencing around our campuses back in 2019. We went out and did an analysis of all of our sites. We know that some of our schools did start to have the fencing installed, but we know that there's still more work to be done, and we need to keep our focus and our priority on completing these projects. We have put security cameras piloted on some campuses, and we will continue to add as needed. All of our sites do require our guests to sign in at the front office and be identified with a visitor name badge. And these are just things that are in place. We need to frequently remind and explain the importance of that. Within our school walls, our staff work to make the schools an environment where students feel connected and really have that sense of belonging, because we know that that is so important. We are continuing to try and increase the mental health resources that are available on the campuses. We've had mental health therapists, counselors, and other healthcare professionals. Students and staff are encouraged at any time when they see something or hear something on campus or through social media to contact, let us know, let law enforcement know, and we continue to reiterate that as well. I think the part for us is that the school shooting was just a tragedy that breaks our hearts, makes us angry, and really makes us all want to commit to doing what we know is right for our kids. It's a bigger thing than just our own district, our own security measures, and we really need to make sure that change happens and begin to pursue this. Fencing, cameras, law enforcement presence on and around the school grounds, they help create safe environments, but we need to do more to stop the violence before it even happens. We as a community need to raise our voices and make systematic changes that prevent the access to weapons. Our children deserve and have the right to be safe at schools from these violent acts. let's do everything we can so that no child, no family, no community ever has to go through the heartbreak that is being experienced right now. So I just wanted to share that. I know that our hearts go out. I know that everyone is hurting and reeling from it, but we need to, it's not just an isolated community that needs to step up. We all need to have our voices be heard. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Yao. So, yeah, so we have something to celebrate also after this, like, and that's what the next one is. Leslie, want to? Yeah.
So it is our pleasure actually tonight to introduce you to the Kennedy Middle School 2022 Science Olympiad team. I'm going to let them present their amazing accomplishments, but I do want to recognize the parents and the students for their amazing hard work and dedication. But I also want to recognize the team of adults behind them. They have young adults who help as mentors. Maybe they'll talk about that a little bit tonight. They have school staff, Teresa Posas and Hambi Ayochi, who support the program, and Principal Nuno, and then most importantly, their head coach, Queen Li Fu. And so I believe she's going to start us off and present information to the board and highlight the amazing accomplishments of the team.
Good afternoon, Suzanne.
I don't think so.
Okay. Good evening. I guess it's evening. Good evening to everyone. Thank you very much, Mrs. Stacy Yao and Mr. Jerry Liu and Satish Mattel and members of the board for having all of us here today. I'm very honored on behalf of my team. We're all very honored to be here again to be recognized by you all. Our team, Kennedy Middle School Science Olympiad team, they have worked very, very hard all year round. And I just also want to update you on the very good news. I haven't sent this out yet because I've been so busy. We 2 weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago, we competed at the nationals and we won second place overall. And that's a very good winning. Overall, we won 22 medals with most of them, well, all of them in the top 13 ranking and most of them in the top medals. First of all, I would like to thank the school district, Kennedy Middle School, Mr. Nuno, Mrs. Posas, our PTA. They have been very generous in sponsoring us also this year with the facilities. Our parent coaches, our team over here, and best of all, our alumni who are now in high school and they're still coming back to mentor our team. Without all of us, we will not be able to make this achievement. Let me introduce the team. So when I call your name, you need to stand up so we can. Okay. So this is Dev, Andra, Soham, Joel, Rehan, Rishi, Hime, Sunny, Alan, Michael. I'll go with the team first. So yeah, Samad, you're standing, just wave. Shamali, Mahati, Rachel, Alicia. I think we have to all of you, right? Then I can just name Ryan, Andrew, Angela, Iona, Eric, Edwin, anybody else? So thank you very much. Again, thank you very much. And I hope we'll get more support from all of you. And I'm sure we will. And I hope that next year we'll bring back, again, another national trophy.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. And we actually have certificates for all of the students, the gold, blue, and ruby. And we thought we'd like to get a group picture, and it may be easier since you guys are all there. Maybe we just have stand and the board can join in over here.
Mr. Chow, if I could make a
Oh,
few
absolutely.
comments.
Yep.
Oh, please. Oh.
Sorry,
Ms. Brooks, go ahead.
I would like to acknowledge Queen Lee for everything that she has done for our students, for continuing to provide these opportunities for our students. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes. And I want to personally thank you on behalf of our Kennedy community, parents, students. So, very humbled. You thanked everybody. But, Queen Lee has really just kept it going. So thank you to you. for your-
Absolutely. Jerry, you want to talk?
If I could just say a few words. So having been, first of all, I want to congratulate the students we have here. I have been involved with Kennedy Science Olympiad in the past, and I know the literally hundreds of hours of work you put into it to get to this set of achievements, and it's really amazing. I'm incredibly proud to have you here in the district. And also recognize that, the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to build a winning team. The parents here, all the practices, all the kids you had to get, all the weekends, probably an entire school year weekends spent on the practices and all the sort of training at nights and all that. I know a lot of work goes into it. Really appreciate the alumni. I know, thank you for having gone off to high school to come back and still continuing the tradition. The administration and Ms. Posas and Ms. Just keeping the facilities open. I know they use gyms a lot, for a lot of these activities. And then last but not, where is she? Queen Lee. I think it's you all know the Kennedys had a tradition over the last several years of having these strong performance at Science Olympiad. And so it's not really a one-time thing. The fact that we have Queen Lee and her team of coaches, a dedication. It's a really, really proud tradition we have here. And so just want to say thank you. I know Queen Lee and I have had a lot of long calls. She's a night owl. Some of these go on into 2, 3, and then she's like fussing over Science Olympia. What about this? What about that? I need to do this. A lot of thought goes into it. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of all of us. Yeah.
Thank you, Jerry. Yep. Anyone want to speak? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Anything you want?
Congratulations, you guys. It takes a lot of work, and I know it takes a lot of work on top of the work that you're doing in school and all the other extracurriculars. So great job. You should feel really proud. We're really proud of you guys.
Dory, you want to speak anything? You're sorry.
I'll just echo what my colleagues said. Well done and congratulations, and so proud of all the hard work that's gone on for all of you.
Okay, thank you. I want to echo the same thing. Congratulations. Thanks, Kinley. Okay, appreciate.
And before the picture, the team captain would like to come and say something and show the trophy.
Hello, good afternoon. First of all, on behalf of my teams at Kennedy Science Olympiad and STEM Boost, I'd like to thank Mrs. Stacy Yao, Mr. Liu, Mr. Madato, and the CUSD board for inviting us here today. It is a great honor to be invited here. My name is Michael Smith. I'm the team captain of the Kennedy Science Olympiad team. I've competed in Kennedy Science Olympiad since 6th grade, but I tag along to all my siblings' tournaments since I was in 1st grade. I have been inspired by Kennedy winning so many medals. Over the years, I've learned so much, especially in teamwork from having competed in 16 events, spanning from theory, binder to lab and engineering or building events. I've enjoyed making many friends in the Kennedy Science Olympiad through study sessions, team meetings, potlucks, and various tournaments. I would like to express my gratitude to you all, to Mr. Nuno and Mrs. Posas, to the Kennedy PTA, Mr. Iochi, Kennedy staff supporting us, to our team parent coaches and Kennedy Science Olympiad alumni who are now in STEM Boost for mentoring and coaching us behind us, and to all my teammates also behind me for your incredible hard work and camaraderie in the Science Olympiad since we were in it as a team. And most of all, to our head coach, my mom, Queenly, for your dedication in nurturing, coaching, managing Kennedy Science Olympiad teams, strategizing nonstop for the past 9 years, and leading us to become a top-tier national team since 2018. And I would also like to announce that this year we were able to get second place in nationals overall. Thank you all.
Before we do the picture, I think I just want to reiterate, so proud of you. And, just to hear the sound of the medals in the background here, it's just amazing the work. And we know the time that you guys have put all into, and just, you are the exemplary of what CUSD is all about. So thank you to everybody in this room, because I know that each one of you put in hours and time and commitment. So thank you and congratulations. Picture? Oh, we have the student.
Head this way for a picture. With your coach. Do you want the mentors to come too?
Oh,
And the mentors, do you want to join them too?
That means they're more flexible to the.
Yeah.
We'll see if we need to squeeze in everyone.
One picture without mask.
No more.
We are done. Now they're back to their
1 year.
section.
Yep. Okay, let's resume. So communication, do you have any employee organization, anyone from employee organization, Irene?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. So we have, next one is a public comment. So typically we reserve 20 minutes, first 20 minutes for the public comments. If anything beyond that would go till, after all the agendized items are over. So how many public comments we have, Irene?
We have 3 this evening.
Okay, so yeah, each will go up to 3 minutes. So let's call the names, please.
Ru Wang, Cindy Fang, and Balaji Sun. If you could please raise your hands or Balaji, go ahead.
Thank you. Able to hear me?
Yes, Balaji, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak about my concern. So, like me, there are a lot of immigrant parents who are looking for visa stamping to go back to the country to get the stamping done. And unfortunately, with the current COVID situation, US consulates are operating at 1/3 of that capacity, due to which we are not able to get the visa appointments. And even if we do get visa appointments, it takes more than 3 weeks to get visa stamped and get the passport. And I believe Cupertino district has kind of a policy of not allowing more than 2 weeks of continuous leave. And with having that kind of policy, it's kind of hard for us to go and get stamped and come back within 2 weeks. So like for my case, I have an appointment on November during Thanksgiving. I plan to come back in 2 weeks time, but I'm not sure whether I'll get the stamping done by then. So is there a way the policy can be lenient for this year, where parents could go and come back beyond 2 weeks? And if possible, we can even take the home packet so that we could work or make the students study during those extra week until we get things done. And that's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Balaji.
Ru Wang or Cindy Fang, if you could please raise your hand. I do not see either
Yep.
person online.
Okay, so we don't see both of you, so you can send us a mail with whatever your comments. Thank you. We'll go to the next item, the consent items, 8.1 to 8.9. Can I get a motion? Okay, Sylvia moved.
I second.
Thanks, Phyllis. Can we have a roll call?
Yes,
for this?
trustee Lou.
Aye.
Trustee Cunningham,
Oh, I think she's speaking. We can't hear. Okay,
She's-
good. Okay,
Thumbs up.
thank you.
trustee Vogel.
Aye.
Trustee Leong,
Aye.
trustee Madhato,
Aye. Okay, so consent items are over. Thank you. Let's go to the information presentation. First one is school update. So I assume it is Leslie again.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to provide you with an update on a couple different things. We'll talk about our final core advisory team meeting. I want to review start times for Dilworth and Lincoln. I presented Lincoln's and told you that we would be working with the Dilworth community on theirs. I want to talk with you a little bit about the boundary map and then preliminary enrollment numbers. The one thing I did want to highlight is that we had intended to have an update on Safe Routes to School today, but our liaison was unable to join us. And so we will have a Safe Routes to School update for you at the first meeting in June. So we're sort of in the home stretch of our work leading up into the summer. Our school sites really are now taking over the work of summer planning with their school leadership and their school communities, their site-based transition teams. And we did have our last district core team meeting. It's either last week or the week before. They seem to blend together. The one thing the group did agree to is that we will be meeting sometime in the fall, either late August or early September, just to review our progress, to talk about how things went, and to see if there are any additional identified needs. If you go to the next slide, just some real brief updates. We did have during Learning Day, the teachers visited their new sites, worked on class lists, and built new relationships. So at our last core advisory team meeting each principal talked about that experience. In addition to that, the site advisory teams are up and running. One of the things that's going on right now at the school sites is this is the time of the year in which leadership changes in the parent levels start happening. And so some of the things that they're discussing for summer activities or early fall activities, they're in the process of brainstorming ideas, but they also need to understand who their identified leaders are. And so we did not make final agreements on all summer activities because our school leaders said we need to know who our people are to make sure that we can live out the activities during the summer. Some of the things that though we were able to accomplish is one of the big things that came up had to do with school sites knowing where their staff would be going. And one of the recommendations from our teacher members was to go back to our faculty advisory teams at the sites that were closing to have a discussion with the school staff to talk about what makes the most sense in regards to timing of announcements. And it was mixed. Some teachers had already shared where they were going, and some teachers were not ready to share. And then we had a bunch of temporary teachers that didn't quite yet know where they would be going. And so the agreement was that on the last day of school, June 9th, the principals of the closing sites will formally announce where individuals are going. Many of our schools, teachers have done it informally in their communities, but some just aren't ready to share. And then our websites will show when we launch our websites for the fall who the new staff are or where our staff are going to whichever schools they're going to. Another item that came up with the core team was talking about self-guided tours. And so we were trying to understand from the parent group what that really would look like and what would be the most useful or beneficial to families. So at our last meeting, they gave us some ideas of things that they thought would be helpful. And then the principals and I will be brainstorming next week how to live that out, whether or not it is a video of some sort, whether or not it is a map in which locations are identified, or whether or not it is another site tour like we did when families were choosing. And so we're going to take their feedback and determine what makes the most sense based on the time that we have left. In addition, the school sites are reviewing summer engagement opportunities. And so I'll talk with you a little bit about that. And we will be publishing a 2-page document with important information for families. And it's taking information from the website, but putting it on a 2-page document that will be sent out to all families. The committee or the core advisory team brainstormed the kinds of things that they felt were essential to have at their fingertips. So certain things were, what were the office hours? What time's lunch and recess? What's the school start and end time? In addition to that, how do I get information about childcare? Another one was, if I want to volunteer, how do I learn about the parent organizations? And then something with important dates for either summer or fall activities. And so we have a template that we've created, and principals will be filling out that template in the next couple of weeks, and we'll have it ready to be launched sometime this summer. So if we go to the next slide, so some of the summer engagement activities that we are exploring, but we have not finalized them at this point in time. One is we do believe that we will be sending out welcome postcards to families of the receiving schools. So all kids will get a postcard from their principal. Actually, Erin helped design those. And so they've gone through her amazing expert process. Principals have looked at them, and we believe that will be launched either the end of July or early August. In addition to that, Pam Durham is helping school sites make sure that they have teacher and staff pictures and bios so that when families are perusing websites in the fall, they'll be able to see who the staff are. And then principals, based on the fact that their leadership, their parent leadership is changing, they will begin identifying volunteers and liaisons for their school site. They just weren't ready to announce what that could look like because those individuals may not be on board yet. They are hoping to do some sort of summer meet and greet or early August greeting. And then again, I'd mentioned the self-guided tours. So the next thing is just sort of to recap where our two schools landed in regards to their start times. As I shared at the last meeting, Lincoln is going to be starting at 8:10. And one of the questions that came up, I think, at the meeting, and I didn't have it at my fingertips, was what time do they end? What does it look like at Kennedy? What does it look like at Monte Vista? So this shows the various times of the morning start and the afternoon pickup. Dilworth did an identical process where they looked at a variety of scenarios. They looked at when Portal started, when Miller and Lynbrook started. They worked with their staff and their community. And where they landed was with an 8:15 start. We know that with our middle schools next year not changing their start time, that there may be a need future forward for us to look at start times again at elementary schools and or middle schools together. So the next slide, and you have this in front of you, I believe, is a colored map. One of the things that has come up is how are we on a flat map going to show the new boundaries that were created, as well as the choices that are available for families. If a family member goes on to the district website, they can type in their address and it will show what's the middle school, what's the default elementary school, and what are the other choice elementary schools. I know you received an email today, I believe, in regards to not sure that the functionality was working. Actually, the size of the screen was too big. If you were to scroll down our website on the link where this individual had seen the middle school, the elementary school choices was present, and our team has fixed that so it's easier to navigate. In addition to that, Decision Insight is finalizing an online map, a school locator that will, it's a little glitzier. It's I think a little bit more slick. So in regards to this map, what you're going to see, maybe we focus on the blue first. So with the blue, what you notice here is there is a bigger blue boundary. The blue boundary incorporates Meyerholtz and Muir. It shows that, let me make sure I got this right. It's the Dilworth boundary as the default school. And then the lines indicate, depending on the direction of the lines, the ones that are going horizontally is the old Meyerholtz neighborhood, showing that Dilworth is an option for the school. Yet they may also choose Eaton and Blue Hills as shown in the grid. It shows Muir also in blue, lines going at a cross angle. And those, it shows that Dilworth, same color blue, is the default school, but those families have the choice of either going to Dilworth or Blue Hills. And then we did something similar for Regnart. Regnart, you're going to see two colors. The boundary of Lincoln has gotten bigger, but as you can see from the cross marks, that if the families in that pinkish area do not choose Lincoln, they have the option of choosing Blue Hills. And on the flip side, if they do not choose Blue Hills, they have the option of choosing Lincoln. We felt this was the easiest. It's really hard on a flat map to do layers. And so we felt that the grid and the key would be able to help us indicate different school locations. Mahmood, Aaron, what did I miss or mix up? I'm good? Okay, great, thank you. So then the other piece of the presentation is I wanted to share information about preliminary enrollments, preliminary enrollment projections. This is the information that we have as of last week regarding staffing and number of students who will be attending a variety of schools. We wanted to first show where our TK classes are at this point in time. So there are 5 sites that will have 1 transitional kindergarten classroom, and there are 5 sites that will have 2 transitional kindergarten classrooms. The next slide. The next one shows school sites and their kindergarten load as of now. And so what we wanted to do here is not just focus on our schools that are receiving schools, just kindergarten enrollment across the district. We know that as a district, we were striving for between 2 and 5 kindergarten classrooms on a campus. Right now, our enrollment at Sedgwick is a little bit lower. So right now we have them slated to have 1.5 kindergarten. We have quite a few schools that will have 2 kindergarten classes. We have a handful, 2.5, another group, 3 kindergarten classrooms, and then our largest is Stockholmeyer. One of the things to remember about Stockholmeyer is our goal has been, how do we continue to look at that neighborhood, and over time, will their enrollment continue to decrease, which it does. At one point in time, they had 10 kindergarten classrooms. And so even though 5 seems like a large number compared to the rest of the district, compared to 10, it is quite manageable, which is exciting. And then the next slide, we wanted to give you a different look at the schools that we would call receiving schools. And so what Erin's created here is a graph that shows grade level bands. At the bottom, it shows the enrollment as of last week. I did a spot check today, and the enrollment at any one of these schools has changed by possibly 4 children. So as you know, it will continue to flex over the course of the end of the school year in summer. So, you know, it's really a snapshot in time. Blue Hills looks like it will have approximately 400 students at this point in time, 17 teachers. And then what you'll see is a variety of different configurations. They do have the 2 TK classrooms, the 2 kindergarten classrooms, 3 first grade classrooms, and then they do have a handful of combination classrooms. We're watching those numbers really carefully. And if they seem to be reasonably balanced combination classrooms, we'll keep them as is. Sometimes what happens is they become a little bit lopsided, and we're able to consolidate into a straight grade level. Eaton is showing approximately 450 students. That's a new site for our transitional kindergarten program. So we are placing 2 transitional kindergarten classrooms on the Eaton campus. And then again, they have a variety of different grade level configurations, and then a handful of, at this point in time, combination classrooms. When our principals sit down and meet with their staff, they do talk about who, you know, they identify who that combination classroom teacher is, but they also really carefully watch the numbers, and teachers know that sometimes they start in a straight and they go to a combo, and sometimes they start in a combo and go to a straight. Dilworth and Lincoln have shown the most amount of growth. Dilworth actually is increasing by 12 teachers this year, based on increased enrollment and they have a number of staff members who are leaving the school, potentially retiring or moving on to some other type of position. And so their number is higher than the others because of change in staffing. So what we see here, a variety of configurations. What we notice with both Lincoln and Dilworth, they have a high number of upper grade students. And so I was chatting with Mahmoud through email today and talking about projections through Decision Insight. It's really tough for them to project what it's going to look like in the future because they don't have any trends for our receiving school sites. So what I did is I sort of looked at, okay, if these just numbers get pushed through, what will enrollment look at these 2 school sites over the course of time? So for example, if today that their Dilworth is expected to be at about 621, if we were to assume same number of kids move forward and approximately the same number of kindergarten students, they'd be at about 524 next year. So these larger sizes will continue to decrease over time is what my projections would be. Again, we'll work with Decision Insight to really look at the trends and patterns over time. And then we've got Lincoln, which will be probably at the 656 next year. When I sort of do the same formula, moving them out a year, they'd be potentially at 600 the following school year. And so it's because large 4th and 5th grade classrooms, everyone pushing up, potentially the same number of kindergarten families choosing those locations.
If I could just add that, if we could stay on this slide too, and just to add, just as a reminder, when we're looking at the numbers that our kinder through third are all staffed at that 24-1, just as they are across the district. And then our 4-5s are at that 33-1, just as that reminder, the numbers that we're using for that as a reference point as well. The other piece is that with Lincoln, that's an additional 5 teachers from this year, I believe.
Yes. Yep. It's 5 additional teachers. Correct. Yep. Okay. So with that, I will take any questions or comments that you have.
Thank you, Leslie. So we go for who wants to start?
I have no questions.
Okay.
Just thank you for a great report.
Thanks, Alice. Yeah, you can go
I
ahead.
don't have questions either. Maybe it's just a confirmation and a comment. So back when we're looking at the boundary map and some of these areas where there's a default school and then another option they can go to, it's a guarantee, right? They're not applying to something. So someone that lived in the green, let's say on the bottom left, if they chose, so Blue Hills is their default and Lincoln is also an option. If they chose Lincoln, they're guaranteed a spot at Lincoln. Is that, so it's as firm as if it was one of the solid colored ones. I just want to make sure.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, great. And then just a comment, I think on the information sheets for the parents that are going out, just thinking back for me in joining a site, I think we're doing a fabulous job here in providing information on the facilities, tours, et cetera, et cetera. One big part of being a parent is connecting with other parents. And so often at a site, there are parent-run groups, mailing lists, Facebook, WeChat, whatever it is. If there's a way to find out what that is and introduce that, because I find a lot of information gets passed that way. We want to make sure the parents that are new to a campus know about these existing groups so that they can be part of them too. So it's just a suggestion.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Laurie or Sylvia, one of you. Laurie, you want to go ahead?
I can go, yeah. I wasn't actually going to have any comments, but I love Jerry's suggestion so much. I'm wondering if maybe we could use Parent Square this summer to kind of refresh all of the social and communication methods across sites. That might be a great sort of kickoff to next school year and or this summer to let people network. Anyway, just a thought. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Laurie.
Yeah.
I just had one question, or actually 2 questions. So the boundary map is great. I think it's, given that what you're saying about not being able to do the layering, I think it's actually really clear to me. So good job. Thank you for doing that. I just had a question. I know that Stacy met with the Realtors Association at some point. I don't know how long ago it was, but will they be getting a new copy of this, or will there be a new update for them? I think there is a concern among some of the homeowners that there is no confusion, and that, when they are listing properties and things like that, that it's very clear where their school boundaries are.
Yeah, and thanks for that reminder. I did meet with them back in December after the decision had been made and shared that information at that time. And I will reach back out to them and share this new map, because I know that is important as our families are coming in and purchasing home and wanting to know where their children will attend school. So I'll make sure we get that out to them.
Great, thank you. And then my other question was regarding so slide 10 with this bar graph is really eye-opening. So thank you for that. You mentioned that with Decision Insight, it's not able to kind of do predictions for future because there's no
existing trends because of the consolidation. I'm just wondering out loud, I guess, couldn't you take it from the,
Percentages.
yeah,
We probably could talk to them about that and see if that actually is, if that's something that they could work with. I think one of the things that they may say is that was 1 year of percentages with families who were already connected to a community and school where we don't know what our new families are going to do. Right. So as a new family, it may not make as much difference to me which school I chose or choose because I don't have a connection to the community. Whereas I think based on our conversations with families, some were swayed with the decision based on where their carpools were going, where their neighborhood was going, where the best friends were going. But it's something certainly that we could explore to see if that would give them any data that could be, would seem reasonable for early projections.
okay, great, thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, thanks, Sylvia. I have, first of all, thanks, and definitely I like the postcard plans and things like that. This is amazing, actually, sending that mail in advance to parents and kids. That's great. And I think a lot of good work here. The question on the slide 10. So is it, I know that this is we say it is a preliminary numbers, and what is the trend in the past? Like now we are in kind of almost end of the, the year. And you think from now till, or beginning of the school, there will be a significant change, or typically in the past, how it was?
It's so hard to predict, to be honest with you. What I can say here at these school sites, we've really tried, like with Jerry's question, we've tried to leave space. We've tried to staff in a way that as families move in, that they actually do have a choice and we don't get into an overflow situation, which typically happens starting around this time of year. So we've tried to prevent that. So it's just really hard to tell. I think that with these schools, it's going to stay pretty solid. The numbers may go up or may go down, but we've got certainly room for them to go up without adding classrooms, which is great. And then we have room to go down and be able to be a little bit more flexible with staffing. It's so hard to predict.
Okay. So because one of the general concern is always like, when some of them apply, they'll get into wait list, for example, right? So that's where I'm coming back also here. So because if someone asks, like, let's say now Blue Hills, if it's already, we have 400 and it's almost in the capacity or not, that's the thing. If they apply there, would they get there, or they would get into a wait list, or when do we decide that?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, right now, as families are moving in and we're placing them for the 2022-23 school year, we don't actually guarantee placement. We typically confirm placement in June with our families. We send them official letters saying this is where you're going to be, or they get a phone call about being overflow. Right now, there are no overflow at these school sites, which is good. There is space across the grade levels at these school sites. It's just hard to predict whether or not there will be, 20 additional kids that come in, maybe in K1, and do we have space at that point in time? What we as an executive cabinet watch really carefully is we do watch the overflow numbers. I'll use Stockholmire as an example. They had a large number of students that we thought we would need to overflow in kindergarten based on the 5 classrooms. HR and I looked at the numbers. We reconfigured the classroom configurations a little bit so that we would be able to reduce the overflow number. And you just never know. I don't worry about Stockholmire because historically, over the summer, we have a lot of kids that go out, which then makes room for the students to come in. We didn't have tremendous overflow numbers this year because we staffed with a little bit of looseness, just not knowing what to expect. And I think we're going to be okay. It's so hard to predict.
Good. The last one on this, if a parent decide for sending a kid in there are multiple options here, can they change their mind and move from, let's say, Lincoln to Blue Hills or Blue Hills to Lincoln? They can do it if they're in the common area.
So They can. So what we did when families made their choices originally, probably for the following 2 to 3 months, we would get daily phone calls from families saying, oh, we want to go somewhere else.
Got it.
We changed our mind. And we were really flexible about just making that happen. My staff did it internally and they just took that email, they switched the kids around. Now that we're pretty solid with knowing who our staff are, what grade levels they're teaching, and it's well beyond that commitment time because they committed in January and they've had lots of time to sort of go back and forth with us. If a family makes a decision that they would like to go to another school site, they do it through a request for transfer process. They have a priority at the other school site as if it's their neighborhood school. So they would be, if there was not a space at the moment in time that they requested, they'd be at the very top of that overflow list. And we keep an eye on that to make sure that, is there something we can do in staffing and adjusting configurations to get those kids in? Our goal is to get all of our kids in to their neighborhood school, if that is what they so choose to do. It's a huge priority of ours.
Thanks, Leslie. That's really good. That's all my questions. Any second round here? Okay, so do we have any public comments on this?
Yes, we do. We have one.
Okay, please.
Sashi Berger, if you could please raise your hand. Sashi? I don't believe I see her online.
Thank you. Then, okay, if that's the case, then I think let's go to the next one, 9.2, water survey results.
All right, so I will turn this over to Chris. We're excited to have Dale back with us to share the results of this survey that was conducted in regards to both a potential parcel tax and a general obligation bond. So Chris.
Thank you. Good evening. Let me reintroduce Dale Scott from Dale Scott and Company. I think Dale has some good information to share with us tonight. Dale?
Good evening. Can you hear me? And will somebody else be moving the, okay, great. Now the superintendent asked me if I could do this in 10 minutes. So I'm gonna keep a timer, and I know that nobody's checking the game, right? Okay, but and I'll just say next slide. Warriors are up by almost 20 at the half, so, but nobody's checking.
Spoiler alert.
I know nobody's checking. You're gonna watch the reruns? Okay. Okay, let's start just some overview. We did a survey, two separate surveys, one for the GO bond, one for the parcel tax. In both cases, we had strong participation. A total of 569 surveys were done. Those were done by cell phones, landlines, emails, et cetera, et cetera. Let's go to slide 4, if you could, please. These slides are a combination of both surveys, both parcel tax and the GO bond. We first asked, these weren't the first questions. I've taken these from the end because I think they're important to look at as we go forward. What is the main way you receive information about the Cupertino Union School District? This is pretty interesting. You have, look at the orange colors in the bottom quadrant. 35% are saying they get most of their information from the district communications, district website, et cetera, et cetera. And if you add on friends and family and district employees, you're at about 50%. So that's a remarkable, very different number, I'm sure, than it was 10 years ago, for example. It's just changed. Slide, next slide, please. We asked the question, do you have, or have you ever had children or grandchildren attend? Look at that, 36%, no, never have and don't have now. Slide 6. I know everybody wants an A+, we've got pretty close, frankly. I mean, when you think of this perception of education, what you know, what would you heard, what would you, how would you describe the quality of education? 42% excellent. That is truly remarkable. You just don't see that around the state, especially after COVID and everything we've gone through. That's usually more like 15%, 12% excellent, very small poor. I'm gonna go ahead to slide 9, if we could. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Quality schools improve property values. I think everybody got that memo, 94%. It's just hard to imagine there's really anything in this community that 94% of the people agree about when you think about it. But they all agree that quality schools improve improve property values. Okay, let's go to slide 11, please. So we did the parcel tax. We divided it in the beginning, we divided it into two pieces. We asked some people a question about an extension, and you can see in the language here, with no increase in taxes. We asked the second group the question without that extension. Didn't mention that it would be a no increase in property taxes. This is asked right out of the chute without any information, just to see how people would react if they get the ballot. And this ballot language will of course change, but that's pretty close to what it would look like for a voter voting. And you can see, again, parcel tax requires 2/3 of the vote, starting out without information. And by the way this question works is, would you be in favor or not in favor, or yes or no? The person says yes. They say, is that a strong yes or is that a leaning yes? So I think we can take those two and put them together. You have, going out of the chutes in this number, 66% yes. Parcel tax takes 67%, 66.7%. Interestingly, the people that we asked, if we can go to slide 12, we asked them the same question, but we left out the language about the property tax, the extension of the parcel tax. There was very little difference. 63% said that they would support that. A little bit less, but really not enough to talk about. And remember, this is absent of any information. This is just where people are giving the first impression. Next slide, please. We then ask a series of questions. They're not in the order I'm going to show you, but their questions are they have been reformatted so you can, aligned so you can see which ones rise to the top. A series of questions. If you knew that, blah, 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 would you be more in favor or less in favor? And so these are the ones that come to the top. And there's a couple pieces of the puzzle I want you to look at and concentrate on. One is that black line, that's 2/3. Another one is over to the right-hand side. The dark red is a person that says, I'm less likely. And the yellow, the orange is I'm leaning no. I don't know, but I'm leaning no. So when those two numbers start moving, we want to think about that. And these four projects statements really work. Protect core academic programs, funds spent only in Cupertino Union and can't be taken by the state, attract and retain qualified teachers and staff, protect reading and writing programs. Those are the four top. I'm not going to go through every one of these arguments and suggestions just because of the time. But those are pretty strong. You can see you're over 2/3 as a lean yes, more likely across the format, and you only have about 20% in the no category. As we go through the other questions and statements, that's slide 14 and 15. I'm not going to go through every one, but you can see that they're good. I mean, they're excellent, actually, but they begin to fall off. A couple things happen. The hard, more likely begins to wane. The less likely or lean no begins to increase a little bit. And so all of these projects still work. Again, I'm not going to go through them. Let's go all the way to slide 16. This one, are we at 16? If you knew that homeowners age 65 would be eligible for a tax exemption, it doesn't work that well, frankly. It kind of works. You have quite a few people, over almost 25%, say they'd be less likely to vote for it because of that. So we have to think about that one carefully, because it's not necessarily all yes votes. And then let's go to slide 18. And this is pretty interesting. If you knew that the measure would extend but not increase the current tax rate, doesn't do very well. It really doesn't. And I don't know what the actual answer is by that. I have a sense, an intuition that it's, yeah. I've heard that before. Really tell me about the programs. That's what I'm really concerned about. So that just, it doesn't move. Now I'm going to change my mind on this when I get to the end and you'll see why, but just to keep that in mind. Let's go to slide 20. So now we have, remember we had two questions, that with the extension and without the extension, and then one without the extension. This is the before and the after. For the extension, they start out at 66%. After they get information, we ask them how they would vote now that they've heard the information. That goes up to 74%. Pretty good. Go to slide 21, please. The 63% before information goes up to 71. Still pretty good. I mean, excellent. Excellent. 2/3 required for a parcel tax. We have, of course, if I can go to slide 22, we have voters, of course, that don't vote all the time and some vote all the time. So we can look at those as the very reliable voters. Those are voters that voted in the last 4 out of 4 or 3 out of 3 elections. On the other side, in the far right, the very unreliable voters who've only voted in the last 1 out of the last 4, 3 or 4 elections. And they're pretty different. Let's just stay on this. You can see of the very reliable voters, this is the information for the extension. You have 72, 75% yes. This is after information, by the way. This is after information. So what we're looking at is, do the very reliable voters stay with you? That's really the question. And you can see this better. Let's go to slide 25, where we can really get, I'm sorry, let's go to slide 26, where we can really get a comparison. So if we look just at the very reliable and the reliable voters, and we compare the parcel tax extension to the non-extension, you can see that the very reliable and the reliable voters support the extension by 74%. When that goes down, when we don't have the extension, that goes down to 69%. And that's why I said I want to change my tune when I get to the end, even though the overall, it doesn't do that well. Among the voters that we know are going to vote in the gubernatorial election, or high likely to vote in the gubernatorial election, that extension works very well. So as I wrap up the results of the parcel tax, not in 5 minutes, but as I wrap up the results, I would say, if you're considering the parcel tax, and remember, you have to do it in the gubernatorial election in order to have an extension, because at the end of the following fiscal year, it goes away, then the November gubernatorial election in 2022 is the date you should be on for the parcel tax. Turning to the general obligation bond on slide 28. Again, we asked this, we divided this group into 2 sections. In 2 groups. In the first one, we asked with no increase in the projected tax rates. And in the other ones, we didn't discuss the fact that there wouldn't be an increase, assuming that there would be an increase in the property taxes. The first measure was 280 million. The second measure was 436 million. So if we look at slide 28, we see that the yes vote requires 55% for a GO bond is 54% without information, before information. But when we go to slide 29, which doesn't talk about the fact that there's not going to be a tax increase and is a higher amount of dollars, the yes vote goes up to 63%. Very curious, very different than you would expect. Let's go to slide 30. Same format. We give them a number of different alternatives. If you knew that, for example, this would replace leaking pipes, would you be more likely or less likely? And here are your top projects. The funds can only be spent locally. Many of the projects require state matching funds, update steam labs, and repair and replace deteriorating and leaking roofs. And then on the following page, slide 31, leaking pipes and outdated plumbing. Those are all the super strong projects, all most of them over 2/3 when you only require 55%. Let's go to slide 37. So remember, the extension was 54% without information. After information, that goes up to 67%. Slide 38, before information, 63%, after information, 66%. Again, 55% is all that's required. So I'm going to look at that same slide that we looked at before, and that would be on slide 43. When we're looking at the very reliable and the reliable voters, comparing that to an extension in the tax rates, which is up in the upper left-hand corner, to not an extension, just a new bond, it goes down. 67% support the extension, 60% support the bond without the extension. So again, you have a situation where even though there are certain pockets that appear to not really care about that extension, when we really look at the highly reliable and the reliable voters, they are more supportive of a tax rate extension than they are a new bond. Now, tax rate extension can be done in this November 22, or you can do it in 2024 in the presidential election. You don't have the same sort of hurdle that you have in the parcel tax. There is, by the way, no reason you can't put both measures on the same ballot. There's no, and I went back and I looked at all of the elections where there were two measures, either two bonds or two parcel taxes, or a parcel tax and a bond in the Bay Area counties, which is a very different voting demographic. And there was no real difference between the passage rate of having two or one in that case. So that was a very, very whirlwind tour of those two surveys. And I'm happy to take any questions that you would have for the board. I would like to go to just one more slide, which is slide 45. If you were to move forward to get on the gubernatorial ballot with either the parcel tax or the GO bond or both, this is the timeline that you would need to think about. A decision would be required quickly. If you were going to pursue the parcel tax, we have to publish notice in a newspaper of record in early July. There would be board action on your July 14th meeting, ideally, and then that would be filed with the county by August 12th. So it's a bit of a quick schedule, but certainly a doable schedule. And now I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dean. So let's go in the same order. Any questions? I think Phyllis, you started.
I don't have anything.
Okay, thanks. Jerry, it's your turn, please.
Sure, thank you. And thanks, Dale. I'll go to slide 42, please. Just some clarification. Okay, before and after for both obligation bond options, but one is a tax rate. So I'm sort of seeing a cognitive dissonance. I'm not understanding the title versus the, could you explain what these four graphs are?
Sure. This is, remember, we ask the question before there's information, and we ask the question after there's information.
Right,
So
okay.
that goes from left to right.
Right. I know. So the top row is
The top row is
The
for the
bond.
tax rate extension before and after.
okay.
The bottom row is not the tax rate extension, call it a new bond, before and after.
Okay. So you've got both tax rate extension and bond on here.
Right, tax rate extension on the top, new bond on the bottom, before on the left, after on the right.
So the title says both general obligation bond options.
Yeah, the both options being the tax rate extension
Got it,
and the
okay.
not. Yeah.
All right. And then, when you count the yes votes, I guess in my mind, there's a difference between yes and lean yes. I noticed in your analysis, you kind of sum them together and just call them yes votes.
We do.
to talk a bit about, and the reason for my question is, and I went back and we did a survey back in January of 19, and we also had these sunny numbers, not unlike the ones you have here, but that parcel, that measure ultimately failed. And so I'm sort of thinking in my mind, should we be discounting on maybe the folks that are lean? Yes, maybe it's not 100%, maybe it's 50%, 2/3. But you have far more experience than I do, so I would love to get your thoughts on this. And
Yeah, we have gone back and we have looked at, after are the results of our polls, then what are the results of the vote? Where does it fall within that measure? And there are certainly outliers every once in a while. You would think of it as a bell curve, and that makes sense. They 80% tend to fall within that margin of error that we were describing. And that's with both the yes and the lean yes. I will say, not as an apology, but I will say that you were on the March 2020 ballot. Is that right? I believe it was the March 2020 ballot. And that was I don't think there was a parcel tax in the state that passed on that ballot. That was just a disastrous ballot. It was because there was a problem with the Democratic primary, COVID was beginning, the stock market crashed. I mean, it couldn't get a worse set of experiences. And so I would really discount that in the analysis.
what about the one before that? We also had one in 19.
We had one in May of 2021.
Yeah, and I think the problem.
20 and 21, okay. Okay, all right.
And I'm not a fan, as I've said before, I'm not a fan of special elections for parcel tax. They're great when everybody loves you, but you are the only fight in town when that happens, and you can take it.
Okay.
They're tough if there's a problem.
So a big picture question then. You've shown us a lot of graphs, a lot of numbers here. What does it look to you? Ultimately, it's our call. I certainly understand that, but does it, both tax rate, tax and bond look feasible? What's looking at these numbers?
Yes, I think let's take them one at a time. For the parcel tax, your only opportunity to do an extension in a general election is November of 20. That's it. You can do a special election before the end of the fiscal year, but November 20. So even though I've shown you a lot of numbers and they bounce around, I still go back to the fact that statewide general elections, regardless of the candidates, regardless of the issues, the chance of success is higher. And it has been for 20 years. So an extension on a general election, I wouldn't pass up that opportunity. That's not a definite it's going to win, but I think it's something you can't go back and get again. The general obligation bond, yes, it would be nice to wait until the 24 election. Presidential election is going to have a much higher turnout, without a doubt. The only caveat on that is 3 or 4 years away. I mean, 3.5 years away before you get your hands. Let me put it this way. You would not receive any funds from that until at the earliest February of 2025. And that is a long, so, that's 3 years from now. It's a long way to wait. So, if you need the funding for projects now, especially if you can keep it as a smaller amount and do the tax rate extension, then there's nothing stopping you from coming back in 24 or in 26 or in 28. That's a pretty decent plan. If you can wait, well, yeah, then there's nothing wrong with that. But I would say you really have to look internally and say, what's the best thing for us financially? As far as putting both of them on the ballot at the same time, that would not bother me. I think there's always a tendency for people to think, well, people are going to shop. They're going to say, I like this one, but I don't like that one. And I've never seen that happen in an election. You're either a yes vote or you're a no vote.
Got it. Okay, well, I'm going to noodle over this. Thanks. Thank you, Dale. Thanks.
Thanks, Jerry. Lori,
Yeah,
turn.
thank you. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dale, for the data and presentation. So we can stay on slide 42. I just want to make sure that I understand the tax rate extension in a GO bond. I know we have some old bonds that are sort of sunsetting, for lack of a better word, in terms of, so how does the extension work? Is it is it incremental that you have access based on when you have things sunsetting, or do you get it? Like, at what point in time does the money become available with an extension?
The money would become available. Let me make 2 points to make sure the board is clear. An extension is an extension of estimated tax rates. You are telling voters clearly in the resolution that that based on our current estimates and our reasonable projections regarding growth of assessed valuation, tax rates would be structured so that they would not rise from where they are today. Now, that doesn't mean that in 5 years, if there's a tremendous drop in assessed valuation in your community, they may not rise above where they are because it's based on an estimate. But you would then, you and your financial advisor would work together to come up with a plan to issue those bonds incrementally in order to keep that tax rate as even as possible. So it's not sort of an incremental as it is a slow and thoughtful process of putting those bonds out to market.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That was my only question. I need to noodle on the rest of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie.
At the very beginning, you had, I'm trying to find the slide. You had talked about how folks get information about the district, and then you had kind of said, I think it was like 35% got it directly from district communications or something like that.
Yes, that's slide 4.
Is that, I'm just wondering, like, what is that, what does that signify, or why is that important, or why, and also, is that compared to statewide, nationwide, or this area specifically?
Statewide, that is very strong. I think why it's significant is because if you go forward, you're going to have to decide, how are we going to communicate with voters? How are we going to communicate with voters? Are we going to have to go out and raise, not we, but a committee going to have to raise literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to communicate with voters? Or can we as a district simply communicate with the facts, not argumentative, not to try to convince people, but these are the facts regarding how we're going to use the funds and what it's going to cost taxpayers, and let you decide, voters, whether you want to or not. So then we have to look back and say, okay, if you're going to communicate with voters, how many of them are listening to you? In this district, quite a bit. I mean, quite a few are listening to you, and they will also get their information, of course, from friends and family in the local newspaper, et cetera, but that's strong. I mean, that's a strong number.
So then, I remember the last time you came here, you were talking about this kind of running a campaign versus just an informational output. So so I guess I'm trying to connect that to the 35%, or I guess the 50% if you can add the friends and family. Then is compared to other districts in the Santa Clara County, and I don't know like the experience that you have with other districts in this area, because I feel like this area tends to be a little bit more unique in terms of the makeup of voters. And so is your sense that with that percentage, that an information only campaign would have a positive result compared to other informational campaigns that you may have been involved in with other districts in this area specifically?
Compared to other districts, I would say you have a stronger probability. The only caveat I would put on is a lot of what determines success in election is who votes, not who reads the newspaper and who reads the article, but who actually casts the ballot. And a lot of that is driven by factors you have no control over. And so if you're walking into an election, and we will know soon, where there really aren't the kind of issues that may drive people to the ballot box, and that's happened not in the recent past, but it's happened over the last 20 years. There have been gubernatorial elections that have had really terrible turnout. And then I'd say, well, maybe that isn't going to be enough. I don't think we can say that now, but given the type of turnout I think there will be, For the gubernatorial election, yes, I do think you could have enough information going out in a non-advocacy way that would work compared to other districts in this community, in this area.
Okay, I think I have to still think things over too, so I don't have any other questions.
Okay, thanks, Sylvia. I have a couple of questions, Dale. Thanks for this information. One is the sample size, right? The 569. So I know you must have had some scientific way to select these people, 516, how you did it. But do you have anything more to share in that 516? What kind of people? For example, I'm little. If you go to slide 5, about a third or 36% of the people whom you talked, they did not have, or they never had a kid in CUSD, for example. So how what would be their thought, kind of typically, because they never had an association to our school district, but they live here. Okay, that's number one. And I have multiple questions on that, but that is number one. Second thing is, do you know these people voted yes or no, whatever it is, or they participated in the last 2 or 3 parcel, elections actually?
Regarding the specifics as to whether they participated in the last parcel tax elections, we don't have that information.
Okay.
But let's look at slide
5.
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to take you to a different slide.
Okay.
If I can take you to slide number 22. And the data within slide 22 is unimportant. It's the numbers I want to show you. So we know that the highly reliable, I'm sorry, let me back up. I want to make sure that you understand that the slide that you are looking at is not the community. This is not a poll of community members. This is a poll of voters, regardless of whether they have children or not. But all voters aren't equal. Some voters vote all the time. Some voters vote very rarely. Now, we don't want to say, okay, we're only going to vote, we're going to go out and poll everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're a vote all the time or you vote very once, or you never vote. As long as you're a registered voter, we're going to poll you. That doesn't make any sense. But it also doesn't make any sense to say, we're only going to poll the people that vote all the time. Because one, some of them won't probably. And two, we know that other groups will also vote. So with the people we work with, they come up and you can see at the top of these circles, the very reliable, the reliable, and the unreliable. Now, what that means is this survey is made up and balanced of people, 62% of which are very reliable voters, 35% of which are reliable voters, and 3% of which are unreliable voters. So that's how, it's not just going out and taking whoever comes in and taking the poll, it's taking it and then balancing it to come up with something that we believe will replicate what the gubernatorial election turnout looks like.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good information. Only I think my other concern is mainly, so we had multiple failures. Then are we, or knowingly or unknowingly, are we polling a different kind of people or not? We don't know. The same people, if we poll, what would have been the results, kind of, right? Like, because the same people would be voting again, right? So I know it will be hard for you to be slicing and doing that, but still though. I don't know whether you had a chance to ask whether they voted in the past or not, or in the past 3 elections, they voted yes or voted or not, at least, right? So, because I'm little afraid is that, are we going to a different set of people or not, right? And in the other part here is unknown is, we go to the same people, how it would have been, kind of, right? Because they probably would be making a lot of, impact on this decision. Now I know it is very hard for.
No, I think I understand your question.
Yeah.
Well, the answer is, let me give 2 separate elections. The answer is, compared to the presidential primary, it is going to be somewhat similar. But again, as I say, I just think the presidential primary is a very difficult election to compare anything to, because nobody knew what was happening and everybody was befuddled during that election. And so what their behavior was at that case, I don't think we can project. If you're comparing it to the subsequent special election, no, it's going to be very different people, very different people. It will be a much larger turnout than you received in a special election.
Yeah, I understood partially, but it's okay. Let me try to digest that a little bit more. Yeah, I'll go through the slides. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So any other second round questions?
I actually do, now that I've
Okay.
noodled over it some. If we could go to slides, let's say 37. It seems to me, at least for me, that's really the crux of a lot of this, right? So we have before and after for both the let's see, was it 37? Are we on 30? Yes, 37 is the before and after for bond. Wait, was there before and after for?
That's for the $280 million extension. This is the tax rate extension before and after. And slide 38 is the before and after for the
larger
new
one.
money,
Is
yes.
there a before and after for the parcel? Sort of
there
finding
is.
my way through. So 37 is the before and after for the bond. And then
Slide 20 and 21 is the before and after for the parcel.
got it. Okay. So what I had, I guess we'll just stay with 20. Well, actually, let's go to 37. The smaller bond amount. There's a 14 points. It's a 14-point swing after the information's been presented. Is that fairly? That seemed like a lot to me. I just wondering, do you see that as an outlier? Is that fairly common that there's such a huge swing, particularly if the larger amount didn't seem to, it's a 1% swing?
Yeah, no, that is, you're right. That's a big swing and it is unusual. It's not unusual in a tax rate extension where the after goes down because people figure out, oh, it is going to cost me something. As they understand is not free. In this case, and in slide 38, I don't believe that people, and you saw it in one of the slides that I presented, I don't believe the tax rate extension component made a big difference to people. I think once they heard the information about what the projects were going to be, that's what moved them. And that's why you see this big swing.
Okay, all right. And then when you had the breakdown for the bond projects, the very last one on the list was student safety. And I was just wondering, given sort of the recent events, do you see that as being potentially something, either it makes people more sort of willing to fund these things, or do you see that as being sort of a, I don't know what slide it's on. There's so many slides here. Thank you for all the work, but it's right, 34, right? The lowest on the list, it's improving student safety, fences and alarms. And I was just wondering,
it may be, my instinct is no, unless this was, prior to COVID, in 2016, 2018, student safety was near the top.
Before COVID. Oh,
before COVID,
okay.
Absolutely near the top. That was on people's minds because there was a lot of discussion about violence in the schools and people sneaking onto campuses, and that was always near the top. And then it fell to the bottom. So this result is not inconsistent with what I'm seeing around the state. So could it rise? Again, of course, but I don't see that happening on the basis of one event. And I hate to be so political about it, but.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dale.
Well, thanks, Jerry. Laurie, you have more questions?
I do have one more that I thought of. Dale, do you have any thoughts on any impacts that you think this period of inflation that we're in, increasing inflation, affects, I guess specifically the one that was called out was the 65 and older exemption, but maybe just in general as well?
I do. I'll say two things about that. The first is that it is somewhat analogous, not a lot, but it's somewhat analogous to the mortgage meltdown in 2016. The mortgage meltdown happened right before the election of November, right during the presidential election in 2016, yet there was virtually no effect on the bonds. on the bonds that were passed. Virtually none. There was, however, effect in 2018. By that time, it had really affected people. And I think there was a little bit less exuberance at that time. So there was a bit of, not a lot, but a little bit of a downturn. Second comment is, and this is going to sound a little glib, but there's some truth into it. As I tell people, a person who brings their property tax statement into the booth with them is a no voter. So, that's generally not the way people make a decision on whether they're going to vote yes on a school bond. Not to say that everybody, but in general, the person who's looking about how much it costs is not necessarily a supporter to begin with.
Thank you for your insight on that.
Is that it? Sorry. Okay. Thank you. Is there anything more?
Not right now.
Okay, I have only the last question. This margin of error is about 5.815 when we say, is it like, for example, yes, voters are 54. Is it 5.815 of 54 or 5% of, or absolutely 5.8 of it?
I'm sorry, what slide are you on?
No, your error is 5.8.
Oh,
yeah. So all these numbers, a general question. So it's like when we say yes is 54, is it 5.8% of 54 or a number there?
It's 5.8 on either side. So a swing of 5.8%.
Percentage of, let's say if it is 54%, 5.8% of 54%, right? Or is it like a 5.54 minus 5.8?
54 minus 5.8.
Okay. So, okay. So there is about a 6% approximately this way or that way.
Correct.
It can, or six, the number 6 can go this way or
Right.
not 6%.
Either way.
Yeah. Okay. So that is, I think, cutting off almost the threshold actually. If you take it, if you are so pessimistic way, if you look into 5.8, if you minus it, it all comes less than 60% most of the cases, or some little bit above 62-ish kind of, yeah. But that's a worst case.
Sure.
Okay.
If I can just make one more comment, the week, I know you have a lot of questions. I'm going to guess you're going to have a lot of questions. The week of June 3rd, I will not be available, but I'm happy to take written questions, and I'm happy to try to have someone here to answer your questions if you'd like, but written questions would be better if possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take you up on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this?
No, we do not.
Okay. Thank you, Dale. That's it then. We will move to the next.
And so really our intent tonight, and really appreciate Dale coming and answering the questions and addressing, is to provide all this information to you, knowing that, you need to mull it over, go back and really look through all 60 of the slides that we went through very quickly. And the intent would be we will bring it back on June 9th to have a further discussion after you've had a chance to really go through those slides. If you want to provide the questions, we can get responses to those and then continue our discussion on our June 9th.
Sure.
So when is the date that we need to make a decision if we're going to do something in November? I know you said it and I forgot.
Well, the last date that it has to be filed by the county is August 8th, August 12th, one of those dates. Your last board meeting is, I believe, June
We have one June 16th.
June 16th.
And then not again until July 28th, I believe.
Yeah, July 28th would be possible. August 12th is the filing deadline with the county.
So either the last meeting in June or the meeting in July. If we need a decision. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then one last comment, just to remind everybody, for a parcel tax, it requires a simple majority of the board to vote in favor of the resolution. For a general obligation bond, it takes 2/3. That means 4 out of the 5 members have to vote yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Parcel 3 out of 5 on 4 out of 5.
Yeah, curious, but true.
Curious is right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so thank you. So we'll go for the budget update, Chris.
All right, thank you. We'll switch over to the slides. Good evening. If my voice crackles, I apologize, but it's a lot better today. Tonight, my plan is to go over and highlight some of the information that we've gleaned back from the governor's May revision budget update. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we know now as far as our budget, because tonight tonight I don't have the full budget for you, and we don't have a lot of the preliminary budget stuff for you, but some of the elements, some of the things I'll talk tonight about kind of lead into how our budget is going to be built on. So let me first start off with where we are in our calendar. So we're still now finishing up the 21-22 budget year and now moving into the 22-23 budget schedule. And so as the slide shows here, we'll be coming back to you on June 9th with our preliminary budget as well as our LCAP plan, with the plan to bring both those items for approval at our last meeting in June. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, let's just talk about the economics. I think some of the board members were mentioning about the inflation. I mean, in the news right now, all of this economic information is, I think, in front of us, and there's a lot of questions as far as what's going to happen because of all of these things. So with the growing fear of inflation right now, the volatility of the stock market, just with the indications that we could possibly be on the verge of the next recession, and then from the standpoint of the state's economic growth, everything's based on property taxes, personal income taxes, corporate taxes, sales taxes. Fortunately enough, those are all trending upward, and those are some of the major driving forces behind the state's ability to fund, or actually, I don't say state's ability, but their mandated responsibility of providing additional funding for education, especially under Proposition 98. Next slide. So before I go too far, I figured let's just start off with the known. And that's, as of this time, based on our known assumptions, we do anticipate next year moving into basic aid or community funded school district. And so for those of you, just as a quick reminder, basically how a basic aid or community funded district works is that based on the district's numbers of students, now I'm talking about enrollment, based on the number of kiddos that we have, and based on how much property taxes we generate locally, the property taxes exceed the amount of money that we would get on a per pupil basis if we were funded based off of the state's LCFF funding model. The state's LCFF funding model is based on the COLA. We'll talk in a few minutes about COLA and ADA. So I just wanted to start here and talk about that, because as we move into basic aid status, some of these concepts, so if we go to the next page, some of these concepts become less and less relevant. So even though later on I'll share with you what the state is proposing as far as the COLA, or what the governor is proposing as a COLA, what some of the budget committees are contemplating as far as the COLA goes, I just want to point out that it becomes less relevant for us when you look at our primary funding source. But COLA does apply to some of our other programs. All of the state categorical programs that we still participate in are all subject to the COLA. ADA becomes less relevant because, again, we're funded based on property taxes. But the indicator will be is really, how our enrollment still ebbs and flows. And then the concept here basically is that, we're going to be mainly benefiting from the amount of excess property taxes that we get. So from one year to the next, our property tax will grow, and depending upon that growth rate factors in based on how many students we have. So that's more or less kind of I want to start with, is that we can talk about COLA all night, but the point being is that it becomes irrelevant as far as our future discussions with our budget. But I do want tonight just to share that information, since it is part of the May revision update, that some of those budgetary assumptions, because if it's not us, it's other districts are also in the situation of trying to gather up all this new information in regards to the May revise. So next slide. So this is just a kind of a reminder in terms of, one, when we look at our budget, we look at our budget over we look at our budget over a 5-year cycle. I'm only showing 3 years here, but because this board has elected to look at a 5-year budget cycle, I'll change this graphic later on, but I just want to point out that we look at a budget as a multi-year budget, not just a 1-year budget. And then within that budget, there are these main key elements that we look at for. Obviously COLA, but as I said, as we move to basic aid, COLA becomes less relevant. But for this graphic here, I'm just showing that COLA is an assumption. And for our purposes, we have 5 years worth of COLA assumptions that we build into our budget assumptions. And then the other thing, same thing goes through all the other LCFF related items. Property taxes, now we're going to have 5 years of projections, and as well as all the other budgetary numbers like STRS and PERS. So we all have 5-year numbers for all of those things. So this is really just a reminder that we have a 5-year budget look, and we look at 5 years worth of assumptions, and that these assumptions change. These assumptions change. So when I come back to you in 6 months, we'll be talking about, we'll be into the 22-23 school year, and that point in time, we'll have better, even more up-to-date assumptions at that point in time. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to get into the May revision. Obviously, my presentation tonight does not have the intention of going over everything that's in the May revise. I've just kind of gleaned a couple of things here tonight that I think impact us, whether strongly impacts us or relatively impacts us. So let's go ahead into the next slide. So as I mentioned, COLA. So for COLA purposes, if we were going to be funded based on LCFF, I gotta see a little closer here, sorry. Let me take one step back. So for COLA purposes, back in January, when the governor came out with his January budget, at that point in time, he was projecting COLA for the 22-23 school year to be approximately 5.33%. Now, since then, obviously, state revenues have been coming in higher than expected. So the new estimate of COLA right now for next year is estimated to be 6.56%. So quite a bit more. And then obviously, because of the projected tax revenues coming in higher, they've also re-estimated their out-year COLAs. So for 23-24, as well as for 24-25, the COLAs have been revised upward. So one of the things I do want to point out right now is that even though the governor's May revise is based on a 6.56 COLA, there's actually some conversation going on at the state level between the two budget committees as to the possibilities of augmentation of that basic COLA. There's been some talk that the COLA could be as high as 10% or possibly as high as 15%. So all I can say at this point in time, nothing's finalized until the legislature and the governor come to an agreement. And so right now for our purposes of building our budget, and I believe, although we haven't gotten an advice yet from the county, is that we probably will be advised to budget conservatively based on the May revise assumption. So chances are if the COLA or the augmentation of a COLA comes in higher, which would be good news, we would bring that information back as part of the 45-day budget update in August. But really, I want to point out that mainly here, we did some math. Even if the COLA was to hit 15%, we don't anticipate it knocking us back out of basic aid status. So I think that's a good thing to know. So for purposes of planning, I think we're pretty confident that we can plan to go forward with an assumption that will be funded based on basic aid. Next slide. Again, if we were an LCFF funded district, ADA is a big thing. Remember when I spoke to you earlier in the year that this year we were the benefactor of the hold harmless, or the ADA hold harmless provision that allowed districts to be funded this year for funding purposes, not based on last year's ADA, but the 1920, so the pre-COVID pandemic ADA level. And so the reference to the cliff was that this year, once districts lost that hold harmless, they would be, and again, assuming that those districts were in a mode of declining enrollment, their funding, their ADA for funding purposes for the upcoming 22-23 year would be close to or less than what it would have been, say, in 2021. And so with that, the governor had heard, and the governor, as part of his May revision, has proposed some, I guess how best describe it, some strategies here to help cushion the fall off of that cliff. And so a couple of ideas that are being thrown around out there is, again, based on a 3-year average of ADA. One of them, they're talking about actually using enrollment instead of ADA. But also when looking at enrollment, they're actually probably looking still at another form of like attendance rate. They're actually talking about something called a attendance yield. But technically attendance yield is no different than attendance rate. It's just attendance divided by, ADA divided by enrollment. So although they're changing some of the terminology, I don't think it changes anything. But as I'm hoping you get the sense that I think the governor is trying to make every effort to kind of lessen the fall of this cliff by this action. But in our case, ADA won't apply as long as we're a basic aid district. But enrollment is still important. Enrollment is still a primary factor that we still have to monitor, because if our enrollment goes back up, well, let's say far enough back up that it pushes us closer to going back into LCFF, we want to monitor that. And I think the other thing that's important too is attendance rate. I mean, even though we're moving into basic aid, it does not mean that we should forget about monitoring our attendance rate. We know that the higher attendance rate for our students makes that much bigger of a difference, right? So for funding purposes, this is kind of, again, just want to preface that, ADA becomes less relevant, but enrollment still is important. Next slide, please. Property taxes. So here's the new piece for us. I apologize, there's a lot of information on here, but let me just try to first summarize a couple of points, and then we can talk about some numbers. But I mean, we're still basing our property tax growth, or I guess our tax base assessment growth, on some fairly conservative assumptions. I think we are estimating our secured property tax assessment growth to grow at a rate of about 5.04%, and our unsecured assessed property values to increase by something small, as I think it's like 0.3%. So based on that, we've modeled out what our 5 years of projected property taxes are, and as you can see there on the bottom far right hand side, roughly speaking, when you look at the projected years of 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26, and so on, we're estimating a growth in property tax revenue. Now this is revenue of about 4%. So this is the basis for which we are building our multi-year projection on, assuming that we're going to have about a 4% year-over-year increase in property tax revenues, assuming we still are staying as a basic aid district. That's all technically new money from one year to the next. Now, I do want to call to the attention of 22, 23. So 22-23 is highlighted in yellow or in that square box. So for this coming year, this spreadsheet actually shows that our property tax grows by close to 42%. And someone may say, well, gosh, that's got to be wrong. Why do you show that our property tax is growing? Well, it is, but it isn't. This spreadsheet here is just created to show what was the increase or decrease from the prior year's level of property taxes. So I do want to call to your attention one line up, the 21-22 estimated year. So this current year, the information we received from the county assessor's office estimates that our combined property taxes this year will be around $97 million, a drop from what had been the prior year, about $129 million. The main, well, I think there's two things that that have affected that number. First and foremost, that every year, the tax assessor's office, they overestimate and underestimate property taxes. So there is the adjustments to the level of property taxes, and the assessor's office comes back and reassesses or underassesses properties, and so those adjustments eventually get caught up, and those are reflective in the numbers. But the main drop, when you look at this year, was about almost $29 million this year in our property taxes. And from what I understand now, that adjustment was mainly because there's something called ERAF, Educational Revenue Adjustment Fund. That ERAF fund is how local governments shift taxes to school districts, and at the same time that fund is augmented by the state fund. So from what I understand, this year, because we weren't basic aid and we were LCFF this year, I think the county assessor's office did their property tax shift where they took some of that property tax back from us and reshifted it amongst other school districts. Because we were an LCFF district, the state is then mandated to make up that difference. So for all intents and purposes, we didn't lose anything. But the fact of the matter is that the county, I guess, reassigned or realigned the property taxes amongst all the other districts in the county. So that's also why I want to point out that as we move into basic aid status, the volatility of property taxes becomes even more paramount. That why later on we'll say that we will need to have a little bit of a higher reserve, board reserve, to be able to weather these kinds of situations with property taxes. Next slide, please. For those of us that like numbers, this is just kind of a snapshot of our total funding. So the top half of this slide here talks about how much money or how much funding we're estimating to receive. This is our total funding for LCFF purposes, because we still have an LCFF budget, even though we're moving to basic aid. Out of that LCFF budget, we have to calculate and allocate monies set aside for our supplemental LCAP plan. And then beyond the LCAP budget and the supplemental budget, based on our level of property taxes, is now creating this excess property taxes. So as you can see on this graph here, we're tracking the amount of excess property taxes. Also, we get some excess taxes under the EPA, the state EPA tax program. And then just below that, so I'm looking at the middle column, the 22-23 school year. So for 22-23 school year purposes, our total LCFF entitlement comes out to about 141 million. We get about 13, we'll get almost close to $13 million of excess taxes. So for purposes of the general fund, we have about $154 million to work with. But then again, to understand how much of that is really our LCAP, if you just go down just below that, you can see the distribution of how much of that funding is basically for our base funding LCFF. And then the new estimated amount for Allison's purposes is $6.4 million for supplemental. I think maybe the most important thing on the slide here is when you look at the very bottom, this calculator, this is a calculator that FCMAT uses to help districts calculate their LCFF. So based on the modeling that we have here, we're showing that we remain in basic aid status over the next 5 years, based on the COLA assumptions that we know today, and based on our enrollment projections as we know today. So those are the factors that go into these numbers. Next slide, please. So I gotta get to my screen. Small print, sorry. All right. So some of the other areas of the May revise, I felt that it was worth highlighting that have some benefits or impacts to us, or maybe not as relevant of an impact. So I'll go down the list. We have our ELO, or Expanded Learning Opportunities Plan. We had brought, I think we had brought before you a plan originally. So a couple of the new changes, we now know it's going to be an ongoing funded program. The governor is actually is proposing to increase funding by about about another $473 more than what was in his January budget. And I think one of the other takeaways in regards to this is that they've extended the time for which we can spend these dollars, because this first year, most districts are having difficulties and finding it difficult to implement all at one time. So the governor is proposing to extend the spending down to the first year, I believe at the June of 2024. One of the other things that we walked away from the workshop when we heard about this was that one of the newer provisions is that in the event that the district is not able to provide this extended learning opportunities program at every school, there very well may be a transportation requirement to transport students or at least students from their home school to a location that has an ELO program. So those are some of the things too that we're going to be monitoring and figuring out if that has any impact on us. Let's skip down to maybe the biggest one on here. So the governor is actually proposing to offer up a discretionary block grant. The governors in the past have done things like this when there has been a huge infusion of one-time dollars, especially in a budget year. And so the governor is proposing to set aside, in this case, about $8 billion towards general fund purposes. There aren't a lot of details yet. All we know is based on $8 billion, that roughly equates to about $1,500 per kiddo for all school districts in K-12. So for our district, roughly speaking, rough math, that's about a little more than almost $20 million of one-time funds. So let me preface again, one-time funds, one-time revenues, one-time funds. And also, by the way, at the same time, this is one of those things that the legislature is negotiating over. And so there is that remote possibility that the governor may not get exactly what he wants, and the legislature may want to allocate some of this elsewhere, hopefully within the confines of Proposition 98. So for our purposes tonight, we're just sharing with you what the May Revise says, but my guess right now, as far as, and although we haven't heard from the county yet, we've asked them the question to advise us as far as should we be budgeting the full 1,500 or budgeting something less or assuming nothing. So we'll get that answer back to us pretty shortly here. Some of the other highlights, although if we move to basic aid, it will not, and I'm gonna say it will not benefit us, but they're looking at funding some of that gap for the implementation of universal TK. I think I shared with you in one of the last Friday updates that, there's just that funding gap as far as having to staff a TK class at 12-to-1, and just with the costs of running a TK class. So the intention here is to help fund some of that gap with this additional almost $2,800 per TK ADA. There's some talk about, well, there isn't any additional talk about funding anymore for transportation. So as you probably recall, they stopped applying a COLA to transportation when LCFF was created. I know that we've pretty much disbanded our regular ed transportation program and are primarily focused on transporting our special needs students. But it was interesting enough that there's information shared with us that the Senate actually is floating something that's called Putting Wealth to Work plan. And under that thought about offering up a universal transportation type of program where one, if there's any debt out there that parents have as far as transportation, taking away the debt, but then as a part of all this, mandating transportation, mandating regular ed transportation. So I think you have a sense in terms of, gosh, how's that going to impact us? And I'll just honestly say that right now we struggle with finding drivers for the amount of routes that we have, let alone have the money to replace our entire bus fleet. So just imagine us having to transport all 14,000 kids of ours. Second to last, universal meals. I think a great thing that we're going to be able to feed every child a breakfast and a lunch. But if you want to talk about unintended consequences, one of the unintended consequences is that as kids eat for free, there becomes less and less of an incentive for that family to fill out that lunch form. And so that lunch form in the past has been our primary mechanism for us to help establish our funding level, which we refer to as the unduplicated pupil counts. So that number really is the number that determines how much we set aside or how much we base our supplemental LCAP plan off of. So there's some alternative income. There's some other ways or some other alternative ways to establish families' income levels. And I believe they'll still continue to allow us to do that. But it's just one of the things that may have an impact with us, even though we're going to be having free lunches and free breakfasts. And the last thing I want to say here is that there's also a plan to give districts some monies referred to as deferred maintenance. Back in the days, the state used to have a deferred maintenance program. Districts also had to match those funds to get it. So it's been probably over 8 years since there's been any deferred maintenance. So the governor's proposing to set some monies aside here, but as you can see on the slide here, it doesn't quite look equitable, at least for me. Or not saying equitable, equal in this case. So the plan is to actually allocate these dollars, not based on the amount of students you have or not based on the number of schools you have. They're basing it on that unduplicated pupil count. So we are a low wealth district that has a very low unduplicated pupil count. And so do our facilities age at a lesser degree than other school districts? The answer is no. maybe maybe the only light here is that, they're saying that there's a minimum of $100,000. So I'm not gonna say no, but I just do want to say that I think it's not quite equal. All right, next slide. I think I'm almost done. Oh, okay. Just some of the other major budget assumptions. We just tonight, I think the board is actually going to be approving this the settlements. So assuming the board approves tonight the settlements, we'll have now settled and negotiated for 2 years. And so assuming all that happens, we will be building into the adopted budget this 2-year raise. The 2-year raise, which is at 7% this year and 6% for next year, roughly costs out to about $28.8 million for 2 years. So that's the 2-year cost. Some of the other things I don't need to mention them. You know that we're still having to manage the pension costs. This coming year, the pension rates are projected to go up. One of the things that's not in the May revise that has been in the May revise and in the budgets in the past couple of years has been some form of pension relief where the governor has allocated some monies to buy those rates down, but there isn't anything in his current May revise that gives any indication that he wants to pay down any of that. So for us, it's roughly about a $3.5 million increase. And that number ebbs and flows as the size of our payroll goes up and down. So that number will change. And I said earlier about property taxes. Property taxes, we're moving to basic aid. I mentioned earlier about the budgetary assumptions that we're using for assess value growth. And then I said earlier, just because of moving into basic aid and with the volatility of everything, I think it does support the staff's recommendation at some point that we look at raising or elevating our reserve levels to as high as 10%. Next slide. And then I just want to end, we shared this information, I think, at our board events that although it's not this year and it's not next year, but it's the year after that the parts, assuming that we don't go out and extend the parcel tax, that the parcel tax comes off the books. So that's about $8.4 million. As you can see on the slide here, this just reflects all those services and the amount of personnel that's tied to the parcel tax. So anyway, I will stop and entertain questions.
Thanks, Chris. So, let's go in the same order. Yeah.
I just have one question and one request. My question is about food services. Now that we're going to universal meals for all kids, breakfast and lunch, is that department still self-supporting or do we support it out of our general fund?
No, Nicole is doing a great job and we are self-supportive.
Okay.
However, it becomes challenging.
Oh, I know.
Especially after a 13% raise.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And my request is that you be generous in when you build the budget in increasing those reserves. I'm super concerned about the reserves as we go into basic aid. So that's my request.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Jerry?
No questions, +1 on the reserve comment. And I really like their presentation here with a box on impact on CUSD. Really like that.
Thank Aaron.
Oh, okay, Aaron, thank you. All right, that's it. Thank you,
Yes.
Satish.
Thanks. Hey, Laurie.
Hi, thank you, Chris. Really appreciated going over it a second time. I know Sylvia and I were able to hear some of this in budget advisory earlier this week. I did want to ask briefly about, you mentioned that the ELOP may or may not come with a transportation hit if they wind up telling us we have to provide it at all sites, but they're not funding us to provide it at all sites. Do we have any sort of thought of like worst case scenario, what that might be for us?
No, I haven't thought much further about that, but I think there's also, I didn't say it tonight, but on that previous slide that showed ELOPE, there's also some infrastructure money that is also available for ELOPE. And I can imagine that school districts that have some transportation needs could certainly use some of that infrastructure monies to help provide some of those gaps. But I think right now, you just have to kind of wait and see. I mean, there is still that possibility that all of the advocates out there that are talking about this will convince the legislature that that's one of those things that, you know what, it's not going to be practical. I mean, to be honest with you, I personally think it'll probably be addressed at the same time when they talk about this universal transportation, because I think it's widely known that not every district transports kids, but if they had them, if they were mandated to transport kids, that no one can do it in 1 year. So I think the likelihood that maybe some of these extra transportation requirements being passed onto us probably would get a reprieve, because you just can't set up shop like that overnight.
Right. It's not just us. Yeah.
The other piece with this transportation, what's on the table of the proposal under the ELOP is the transportation to and from. It's not just to the site where it's being offered. We would also have to provide transportation back to either a common area or to their other site. So it's two-way traffic. It's not just to the program.
Wow. Okay. And then briefly, my other question, the slide, I think it's the one right before this, maybe 11 with the, so Chris, you called out the LCFF grant line, and how did we, sorry, not the LCFF grant line, the supplemental and concentration grant line, and the 6.5, a little less than 6.5 that would be building out in next year's budget. I know when Nicole had come and did her student nutrition presentation, it might have even been back in the fall, there was some indication at that point that the forms that we were collecting were indicating that we'd had an increase in our UPP through the pandemic. Has that held? And is this already reflective of that boost? I think at the time she was saying maybe 14% up from 8%, but maybe I'm misremembering those numbers.
Lori, I mean, thank you for the question. Actually, this is something I will be bringing back when we talk about the preliminary budget. I have a feeling that the calculation here is just kind of based on, well, actually, is based on this year's UPP. So it should reflect this year's. But what I don't know is what's being projected out. But can I bring that information back to you when we bring it back to the preliminary budget?
That would be great. Thank you. And then Satish, I don't have any other questions. I did just want to +1 Phyllis and Jerry on the reserves. I think that slide showing some of the volatility in the property tax base speaks for itself and how concerned we need to be about that. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. Sylvia.
I don't have any additional questions. Like Lori said, I attended the meeting a couple of days ago, and Chris and Erin, great job on these slides.
No, thank you both both of you for being there and your comments. They were appreciated.
Thanks, Sylvia. I have only one question, Chris. This COLA will still apply for some of the other state program funds, right? What for, even in spite of being in basic aid, even though we are saying that COLA is not or probably less relevant. So what are those programs kind of things? So it's a benefit for us, right? From that point.
Yeah, there's a mandated block grant that we get. ELOPE. I'm trying to think of other state programs right now still. Special ed. So there are just a handful. There's just a handful. And then anyone's, I mean, again, we don't have the demographics to apply for a lot of these other state categorical programs. But back in the days, all these programs were like, the old SIP budgets, the textbook budgets, transportation, all of those were all subject to COLA.
Is it a proportional percentage increase?
I'm sorry.
Is it a proportional percentage increase? We can get some benefits there.
I'm sorry.
What kind of, is it a significant benefit in terms of money? If the call-up percentage increases on this category?
Oh, well, let me say this at first. I mean, when our primary funding is going to be based on property taxes and less on COLA,
Correct.
I think I when I looked at all of our categorical programs, I think I estimated maybe 10% of our budget
Okay.
is really going to benefit from any amount of COLA.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. I think that's all I have. Any second round questions? Okay. You want to add something or what?
No, I was. checking to
Okay.
see if
So
we
any
had any-
public comments here?
No, there are not.
Okay. So then I think, thanks, Chris. Then,
Thank you.
so you'll be bringing back again in, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Then. So we'll move on to the next one. So there's a discussion item here, LCAP.
This is going to be a brief check-in to remind you of where we are in the LCAP process. The documents will be coming to you at the meetings in June, but I wanted to be able to provide a quick check-in on how it's been going with the engagement process, and then a reminder about the other components that go along with the LCAP, which are the federal addendum and the local indicators. So this is our timeline. So we're moving right along. We're in that stage of drafting the LCAP and meeting with our PAC and DLAC. That happened where we shared the draft, and we're collecting feedback from any parent right now who has feedback on the draft. And we've been going through our meetings with the county to make sure our document's in good shape. And then we'll be bringing it to you in June. Along with the LCAP itself, we'll be bringing the federal addendum. That document shows how the Title 1, 2, 3, and 4 funding sources complement the actions in the LCAP. You might remember from prior years, we received Title I funding to support low-income students, and most of that funding is directed towards DeVargas and Nimitz. So we'll explain how that connects to the LCAP. Then there's Title II funding, which is mainly professional development funding, Title III EL support, and Title IV is whole child, which includes things like a well-rounded education and effective use of technology, as well as safe and supportive school environments. So we put all of that together and then also share the local indicators to show you that final LCAP package. So that will be coming as we get into June. We've had a lot of really great conversations and inputs. We can go on to the next slide. And all in all, by the time we're done, it will have been 48 different meetings, including the EC visits to the school sites. We've been doing our student surveys, our parent surveys, our staff surveys, and having lots of great inputs and conversations to help us prioritize and identify the actions. In your weekend news, I'll be giving you that one page of just the actions. So it's kind of that short form to help you know what's coming in that very long document, so you can get your mind around that and let me know if you have any questions. And just a reminder, we have the 3 overarching goals that are aligned to the district priorities. In goal 1, you're going to see all of the academic components. That includes core academics, as well as the basic conditions like facility inspections and those components, as well as interventions that are academic. In goal 2, you will see all of the whole child actions. So these are things like our recess support programs, site funds for art and music, site funds for social emotional learning, and clubs and activities, as well as mental health supports, counseling, care solace, things like that. And in goal 3, you will find all of the community engagement components. So things like parent education, our parent liaisons, our staff secretaries that engage with parents and translation services, things of that nature. So just trying to give you a sneak peek and a reminder. So when you get that very long document, it kind of makes sense. All right. So I think that is the last slide.
Thanks,
Do you have
Alyssa.
any questions about what's coming?
No questions here. Thank you. Thank you as always.
Thanks, Alyssa.
No questions. Looking forward to seeing the very long document.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything, Glory?
Nothing from me. Thank you, Allison. Looking forward to the next. Actually, I do want to say thank you to all of the committee members who participated. I know our principals and Leslie and you and all of our staff have been working really hard to get all of that community input. So I just want to acknowledge everybody who participated in that process and thank them.
Thanks. Anything from you?
No questions for me either. Yeah, just thank you. It's been so much work and such comprehensive work, and just really appreciate the thoughtfulness that's come into all of this.
Thanks for that. So same from my side too. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate. So we'll move on then to the actions.
And also
Okay,
there's
sorry, any,
No public comment.
okay, sorry, yeah. Okay, actions, let's go for 11.1, approval of expanded program. So these are actions. So we'll start with, some emotion, then.
I'll move to approve the expanded learning opportunities program plan.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. And a second, please.
I'll second.
Okay, thanks, well, please. You want any discussions? Any discussions, Laurie, anything? Okay, good. So can we do, okay, any public comments?
No public comment.
Okay, then can we go for a voting then, a roll call vote?
Trustee Lou,
Aye.
trustee Cunningham,
Aye.
trustee Vogel,
Aye.
trustee Leong,
Aye.
trustee Manhato,
Aye. Thanks, motion carried. Okay, 11.2, ratification of tentative agreements of MOUs, which is USD and CEA. So can we get a motion again here?
I'll move 11.2, the ratification of the tentative agreement between CUSD and CEA for the memorandum of understanding.
Okay, thanks, Laurie. And can we have a second, please?
I can second.
Thanks, Sylvia. So any discussion needed here? Anybody, any of you? Okay.
I
so
just
okay, thanks.
I just wanted to say thank you to the bargaining teams. I know both sides have worked so hard. I think Mike had told us in a previous session, like 22 sessions that you guys had to meet to work together. So thank you for the work. And frankly, I'm really happy that we have an agreement that gives our staff the compensation that they deserve, and that brings us up to a competitive level with just the neighboring districts around us that surround us. And so ultimately, this is going to benefit our students, benefit our schools. And so I'm just happy and thank you for the work that you guys have done.
Thanks, Sylvia. Any public comments here?
No, we do not.
Okay, so if no comments, can we go for a voting?
Trustee Lou,
Aye.
trustee Cunningham,
Aye.
trustee Vogel,
Aye.
trustee Leong,
Aye.
trustee Manhato.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. 11.3, approval of this one, new salary schedules. So can we get a motion for that first on the table?
I move.
Thanks, Wallace. Can we have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion needed?
Mike, you need a mic.
There's a corrected salary schedule for 22-23. Down in the tiny bottom, it first said 187 days of teaching days, and so we need to correct that to be 186. So it's just the correction was on there. I just wanted to say that so you knew what that was.
So are you all okay with that, or should it's okay? Any of you have any comments on that correction?
Wait, are you saying that we need to correct it, or that the corrected document
It's
is the one
corrected
that
out.
we're?
When we first initially submitted it, we saw that it was 187, and so we attached the corrected one with 186.
The 186 reflects the ratification that you just approved from the prior item.
Right.
Okay. Any discussion? So, okay. So any public comments?
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you. Then can we go for a roll call vote?
Yes. Trustee Lu,
Aye.
trustee Cunningham,
Aye.
trustee Vogel,
Aye.
trustee Leong,
Aye.
trustee Madhato.
Aye. So the motion carries. Thank you. Then I think we are on the board activity to lot 1. Again, the same order we go. Anything?
I think the end of year activities have been fun. I've been to several schools to see kind of what's going on and see their programs. And other than that, no, nothing going on.
You and me attended the wellness committee.
You're going to talk about that.
Oh, okay. Then both
I
of
went
us
to the
were
wellness committee, but
there.
tell you everything.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jerry, anything?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Laurie, anything?
No, Sylvia and I went to budget advisory and there is, I'm just looking forward to all of the promotion ceremonies and all of that coming up in these last few weeks of school.
Okay, thanks, Laurie. Sylvia?
Sorry, did you go already?
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry. So yeah, it's like echoing Phyllis, I feel like there's been so many year-end activities, but it's been so fun. And so thank you to the teachers and the principals that have been inviting us to attend these things. I think, Phyllis and I had a board office hour. And so that was good to just kind of, I think that's our last one for this school year. And I'm not sure, we're probably not doing it again until the start of next year. And then several of us attended the staff retirement recognition yesterday afternoon, which was really just so delightful to be able to honor our retiring teachers and staff and recognize the work that they've done and just the legacy that they've left with their work and with the service that they've done for our schools and our students. So that was really wonderful.
Well, thanks, Sylvia. I think for me, the same thing. The function, all 3 of us were there yesterday. Then wellness committee was there. Then I visited Faria for parent. They have an evening, so it was a big things with food and dance and everything. It was good. I think I
Are
don't
you
know.
able to give us a quick what happened at the wellness committee or?
No, I don't have somebody to give right now. Yeah, it's more.
Will there be?
More on the, yeah.
yeah, it was pretty much an
On the-
update
on the-
of what we're doing in terms of tiers, MTSS,
MTSS,
whatever
yeah,
those
yeah,
letters mean.
yeah.
And so Nick primarily was the one that shared MTSS stuff with us. That was about it.
Yeah, that's
There
what.
were no
it's kind-
recommendations or anything
No,
that came
no,
out of it.
it was more. I think it was very much a presentation. No major.
Right.
Interactions or anything on that.
Good update.
Good update. Yeah, I don't know whether they are going to have now kind of this almost like all the people are new in this like this year. So
Lots of new people. Yeah.
yeah, I think pretty much that from my end. Anything? Yeah,
For
you
me, just looking
Okay.
forward to the end of the year celebrations.
Okay. Thank you. Then we have agenda setting. Any items need to be added in the next 2 meetings, actually, or at least we can say.
Nothing from me. Thanks.
Okay. Anything, Jerry? Laurie? Yeah.
I have a question. In the timeline that Dale had, I thought there was a July 14th meeting. Are we keeping that on our?
No. So what he said is by July 14. So either you have to do something by, end of June, kind of, or our last meeting in June, something we have to make some.
Got it.
That's
I
all.
think, yes,
I
I got
think
to
he
remember
assumed
that.
we had a
Thank you.
July 14th because we have the 2 board meetings in a month. So I think he assumed we had on the 14th, not realizing that we didn't.
Yeah. Otherwise, the last meet or the first meeting in July, right? Like
I believe it's July
yeah.
28th.
July 28th. So because August 14th is, I think, yeah.
Okay, that clears it up then. I just didn't have it blocked
Yeah.
in my calendar, so I wanted to make sure. Thank you. So if we needed one, we'd just have to do a special then, I guess.
Yeah. Otherwise, June 16th is our last meeting.
June 16th,
Right,
but
and then
we
it
could
ends.
also could bring it back onto that first meeting in July or first meeting back. That would still give us the time to submit by the August 12th deadline.
Great. Thank you. That was my only question here.
Okay. Thanks. Sylvia, anything?
No, nothing for agenda setting. Thank you.
Okay. I think, thank you. Then We don't have anything. So the meeting is adjourned then.